What's up you guys, Mo Awesome from Awesome MTB and welcome to the Awesome MTB Ultimate XC Bike Shootout. Climb, putting some power down, hit the suspension, opens up instantly, and right back to lock. What's up you guys, Mo Awesome from Awesome MTB and welcome back to another bike review. So in today's video, we're actually gonna be reviewing SRAM's Flight Attendant. Over the last few weeks, you guys probably have seen our XC Buyer's Guide. We actually had two bikes in for testing with SRAM's Flight Attendant. We had the Evil Following and then we also had the Specialized Epic. Now the Evil Following is probably the most interesting bike because I think a lot of people wouldn't consider this an XC bike. However, this was spec'd with the new Rockshox Flight Attendant with the SID fork and a SRAM XX SL build. So this thing was actually about 26 pounds, and I also spent a lot of time on the new Specialized Epic 8, and that was actually the S-Works version, and that comes stock with Rockshox Flight Attendant. Now, a lot of people were probably very interested because I'm actually someone who doesn't necessarily love transmission. Once again, you guys, I loved AXS, I loved the preciseness, I loved how fast it shifted, and then transmission just felt a little bit slower, a little bit clunkier, and yeah, I just overall didn't vibe with transmission as much as AXS. When I heard of automatic suspension, I definitely was skeptical, and I think a lot of people also thought I would not be down for it. So in this video, we're gonna break down my experience with Rockshox Flight Attendant, and I'm gonna let you guys know if I can recommend it or not, and how I feel about SRAM Transmission as well, because I feel like this is all gonna be technology based. So let's talk a little bit about Flight Attendant at first. So once again, you guys, it is automatic suspension, and it was found both on the Following I was testing as well as the Epic. So up front, we actually have the SID Ultimate fork, and in the rear, we have the SID rear shock. On top of that, both bikes had a full wireless system because it's actually an ecosystem. Basically what the suspension is doing is it's taking a bunch of calculations while it's out on the trail, and it's trying to figure out what it should be in. Should it be open? Should it be in pedal mode? Or should it be in lock? Because there is three positions. So setting up your Flight Attendant is actually very straightforward. You're basically holding two buttons up front when you're setting up your sag, and then you're doing this tilt calibration. And I would say it only takes a couple of minutes. Now, like I said, you guys, both these bikes have the full wireless system, drop repose transmission, as well as the Flight Attendant. However, you technically only need the power meter to run Flight Attendant, as well as the Flight Attendant, obviously. Now, as for settings on your Flight Attendant, you actually have a lot of control of the suspension via the app. And in the app, you can actually make a lot of cool adjustments. Number one being the bias adjustment. That was actually something that was pretty cool. You can go in between -2 and +2 via 1 increments, and you can set up your bias adjust that way. And that's gonna make it to where it's a little bit more pedal or a little bit more open friendly. For me personally, I found myself with the +1 bias. It was a little bit more on the pedal friendly side. However, I definitely could see some riders preferring a little bit more of an open setting. Another cool feature in the app, you can actually set up the override. And override essentially is gonna allow you to basically have a button that you press, and it actually will override the Flight Attendant, the automatic part, and it'll put it into one of the three settings, whether it's pedal, open, or locked out. I actually found myself on the Epic having my override mode be locked out, and on the Evil, I actually had my override be open, and I'll touch on this a little bit later on, but yeah, that is a cool adjustment. Another thing you can do is you can also prevent the bike from automatically locking out, so you can take that out from both the fork and the rear shock, or you can prevent just the fork from locking out. So if you don't like your suspension going all the way locked up, you just want to be in that pedal mode when it does automatic suspension, that is another cool feature that you can make. Another cool thing you can see in the app is going to be the adaptive ride dynamics. And once again, you guys, we are talking about smart suspension, so it does get better with each ride. And I found a lot of that is coming through that power meters reading. And basically in the adaptive ride dynamics, you'll actually see 4 different zones. The suspension is predicting what zone you're in based off your power output. So it knows when you're putting in little effort or maybe you're just kind of cruising, and that's when the suspension obviously will default to a little bit more open. And also knows when you're sprinting and you're putting out all out effort. And that's when the suspension will actually recognize that you need a little bit more of a locked out pedaling platform. And if you look in the chart, you'll actually get 4 different settings. Those are going to be ranges based off of your power output. Generate all of those calculations after a few rides, and it only gets smarter from there. Now, the cool thing is you can actually go in there and manually adjust it, so you can basically lower the threshold. So if you know what power output you want your suspension to be locked out in, manually adjust that, and that's another cool feature of the automatic suspension. So now that we've touched on all of the adjustments that you can make inside the app, let's talk about how this thing rides and the things that I love about Flight Attendant, and then we'll get into the things that I didn't love, because there are some things that I don't necessarily love about it. So the first thing that I want to talk about in terms of things that I love is it is a very clean system. I know this isn't ride performance, but if you just look at the front end of the Epic as well as the Evil, man, it is so clean just having two cables up there. In terms of remote lockouts, I do also feel like it's one of the most efficient lockouts. On the Rockshox Twist as well as the Fox 3 position, they both feel very ergonomically uncomfortable. And obviously there's no control besides the overdrive, just pressing that button. And yeah, if you look at bikes with a mechanical lockout setup, they definitely have a much more rat's nest look from the front end. I'll actually put an Epic and another Epic, one with wireless and one without wireless. You can see the rat nest cluster from a full mechanical setup as opposed to a full wireless setup. So yeah, I definitely think that's going to be a huge benefit there. What's up, you guys? Hopefully you're enjoying today's video. Just want to take a quick second and thank today's video sponsor, and that is Bluetti. You guys have been following the channel. You know we love portable power, especially living in a van full time. We're out on the road, especially cloudy days when our solar can't charge that well. We don't like to rely too much on our house batteries because we don't want to drain them, especially if we don't really know where we could charge the van. And that's where the Bluetti AC70 comes in. This is a 1000 watt portable power station, and honestly, you guys, this thing is the ultimate combo of sleek and portable, but at the same time very powerful as well. So the AC70 has a super easy to carry handle, and on top of that, it can actually power things like our espresso maker. I know it's a little bit extra in a van, keeps the caffeine going. And yeah, the AC70 is powerful enough to power both our espresso grinder as well as our espresso maker. On top of that, we can also use it with our rice cooker and other appliances. Honestly, you guys, anytime you're cooking, you're using appliances in the van, you're probably draining your batteries a ton. And if it's a very gloomy day, you definitely don't want to drain that house battery. So the Bluetti is an amazing thing for that, as well as charging our camera gear, because we're trying to keep the show on the road. We have a lot of batteries to charge, so yeah, it's always nice to have a little bit extra power in the van. The AC70 comes with a couple of charging cords. If you look at the machine, besides having a really awesome digital display to tell you everything that's going on, you also have a DC input and output so that you could charge it while driving or via wall outlet. On top of that, you also have USB as well as USB-C on there. You also have two 120 volt standard wall outlets. The thing that I absolutely love about the Bluetti AC70 is the fact that it is super fast charging, and this thing will actually go to 80% in about 45 minutes of charging, which is absolutely insane. And you can also charge it via solar as well. So many different ways to charge this. Even if you don't live in a van, it's always good to have a portable power station just in case there's an emergency or if you ever need a little bit of backup power. Once again, you guys, the Bluetti is also very durable as well. It will last thousands of cycle uses. And once again, you guys, the Bluetti AC70 is an amazing unit, especially if you're looking for a portable power station. I'll leave a link to the Bluetti AC70 in the description of this video. With all of that being said, let's get back to the video. Another thing that I absolutely love about the Flight Attendant is how fast and smart it is to adjust. I really tried tricking this thing. So I would just be kind of cruising along on a climb, just trying to make it think that we're going uphill. And then I would just compress the suspension rapidly. It adjusts in microseconds. You see it just go full open as soon as you almost compress, and you're almost like, whoa, how did it do that? I think I read somewhere that it's taking about 80 or so calculations at the same time to figure out what's going on out on the trails. And yeah, that was a very impressive feature. And the same thing was when it came time to sprint. I remember especially on downhills that had a quick uphill right after, as soon as I would go to start sprinting, I would just kind of instantly feel that pedaling platform there. I honestly think that's also what allowed the Evil following to compete with other bikes in the XC lineup. Another thing that I really loved about this thing, and I actually did like that this was their marketing angle. Sometimes I feel like companies will throw marketing jargon and then you end up trying it out and you're like, that doesn't feel like what that's intended for. But so SRAM is claiming that this allows you to just ride your bike, and that's why it's faster. You don't have to think about what suspension position you're in. You could just ride and go. And I actually think in an XC race environment, especially when you are just fully cooked, your brain's not there, your heart is about to rip out of your chest, that's where I really do feel like the benefits of Flight Attendant come. Because once again, you guys, especially when you get to the top of a climb and it's ready to go downhill, you don't have to think about, okay, I need to open my suspension. It's just like a microsecond or a second of thinking about what position am I in that you don't have to do with Flight Attendant. It allows you to ride faster because you don't have to think about, okay, what position am I in? Now, let's talk about some stuff that I don't love about Flight Attendant. Number one is the noise. It definitely is a noisier system. Climb, putting some power down, hit the suspension, opens up instantly, and right back to lock. Now it knows I'm cruising. You can definitely hear the electronics especially when it's shifting over. Now, I was told that after a few rides, I would get used to it, and I did get used to it for a bit. However, there were certain moments during the rides, especially when I was cooked on longer endurance ride, that I would just hear the suspension moving. So yeah, I definitely think the motor is a little on the noisier side. However, you do get used to it, but that is something to keep in mind. Another thing that I did notice is the suspension did feel a little sensitive on climbs. Basically what I'm talking about there, and there is the override mode, which would actually disregard this. You can put the override mode into lock. However, I felt with steeper fire roads, especially if I hit a bump with the fork on the trail, it was very quick to open up and go right back to the lock setting. Now, what this ended up doing is it would just kind of throw you off a little bit when you were climbing. Obviously, if your suspension kind of goes open and then back to lock. But yeah, I definitely felt like the front end was very sensitive to bumps on the trail. It would be very interesting to have a much more long-term test. Obviously, I was splitting my time between this bike and the Epic, as well as 5 other bikes for the XC Shootout, but in terms of power accuracy, it wasn't able to kind of fully get all of my calculations in one system, so maybe that would be adjusted with time. Okay, so now that we've gone over what I love about Flight Attendant and then also some things that I don't love, can I recommend it? I'm gonna say yes. I actually think Flight Attendant is probably the best lockout in terms of suspension right now. And I really do think that XC bikes need lockouts. I just did that 7-bike XC buyer's guide, and that's where I truly realized the potential of lockouts. They just make XC riding so fun. But once again, you guys, I do feel like lockouts are so behind, especially mechanically actuated one. If you look at a wireless system, you look at the cable management, it's just so much of a cleaner setup. I feel like a lot of people are like, well, Mo, don't you not like technology because of SRAM Transmission? SRAM Transmission, I feel like never solved a problem. I actually think it made something worse. I feel like SRAM came out with AXS. It would shift exactly when you wanted to. It was fast, it was precise. And then they came out with transmission, and transmission basically doesn't shift when you want to. It shifts when it thinks it's a good time to shift. And then on top of that, it made a lot of stuff more complicated, like setup, swapping it to bike, traveling with your bike, taking that derailleur off. And then you have to have proper torque spec. And once again, you guys, I don't feel like transmission solved a problem. And what it was trying to do, which was basically be a smart drivetrain, didn't really happen because it wasn't doing many calculations. Flight Attendant, I feel like, actually solves a problem. I feel like it cleans up the front end of bikes, it makes cable management very easy, and on top of that, it solves the problem of, okay, how do we make an effective lockout? Because obviously you need your dropper post, you need your shifters, and you want to run grips that you want to run, and that allows you to basically use your own grips, have a very comfortable lockout, which is automatic lockout, and then also have a very clean front end and very easy cable management. Yeah, I feel like Flight Attendant solved the problem, and it did so via accurate calculations. I said almost 80 or so calculations at the same time, figuring out what it's gonna do out on the trails. So yeah, it's making those calculations for you. However, it's making it in a smart manner. Once again, transmission's not taking many calculations. It's just basically where the ramps are. Now, something to note, I actually don't think the Flight Attendant, and SRAM's probably gonna hate that I'm gonna say this, I don't think it needs the AXS dropper post and the transmission. I just noticed that the times when it would make all those calculations based upon sprinting and whether I was sprinting or going downhill and how fast I was going, I felt like a lot of that was, once again, everything going on in the Flight Attendant and the power meter. I don't necessarily think you need the dropper post or the drivetrain because I don't feel like it played as much as a factor as the power meter reading. And yeah, personally, I would just go with the power meter and the Flight Attendant suspension and call it a day. The coolest part about it too is Rockshox is actually offering the Flight Attendant upgrade kit. So you can actually take this Flight Attendant and you can put in other Rockshox suspension. So to summarize everything up, I really do think that Flight Attendant is probably the best lockout suspension in the game right now. And it's also a really cool invention. I'm super stoked on it. Would like to put a lot more time on this and do a very long-term review, just get all the power meter readings from one bike from me. But I will say, just over the course of the last few weeks, I'm sold. I feel like Flight Attendant is heading in a good direction. Huge kudos to Rockshox for doing Flight Attendant the right way. We'll put links to everything in the description of this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this review. Let me know in the comment section if you have any questions or any things I didn't touch on in this video. Subscribe to the channel and not miss out on any more content. And with that being said, until next time, you guys, ride awesome.